Hey everyone, the film Nuremberg stars Russell Crowe and Rami Malek, and it captures the historical essence of the Nuremberg trials of Hermann Goring and 21 other top German officials under Adolf Hitler. The Nuremberg trials really marked the first time in history when world leaders from multiple nations came together to transform global justice, uniting former allies and adversaries to prove that even in war, law and justice really must prevail. This principle has shaped every war crimes tribunal since, creating the legal blueprint for how the world prosecutes crimes against humanity today. It was quite literally the most important trial the world had ever seen. So the fact that director James Vanderbilt made a new film about this moment in history says a lot because it reminds us not just that 6 million Jews were targeted and killed by the Nazis, but also that upwards of 70 million people lost their lives through the German war on Europe. At the time, that was roughly 3% of the world's population. Nuremberg really captures a time when the world had just won a war that didn't really feel like a win because of the total human destruction that the Nazis had caused and the absolute loss of life that was suffered. These trials were humanity's response to that travesty. The nations of the world really set aside their political, regional, cultural, and social divisions to create a global framework to protect people from future atrocities. That's what this film aims to show. The problem is, it doesn't always do it accurately. So let's get into that and figure out if this is a movie for you, because whether or not the film is actually good and whether the performances hit their marks or not, there are definitely moments that will resonate deeply for some viewers. And for some viewers, it just won't work. So I'm going to focus on the information that I need to share in order to help you decide if this is a film that is for you or if you're just going to hold off, because that is the whole point of a review like this. There are two major threads running through the film. One follows Supreme Court Justice Robert H. Jackson's effort to unite an international court under impossible political strain. The other follows American psychiatrist Douglas Kelley's increasingly personal obsession with understanding his subjects and the nature of what makes a man evil. Both stories mirror each other. Jackson's fighting for justice for the past through the rule of law, while Kelley is fighting to prevent widespread evil in the future. The film really begins along a rural road in Germany where a Nazi car is stopped by American troops. Hermann Goring, Hitler's second in command, steps out and surrenders voluntarily. Russell Crowe's first appearance sets the tone for the film and for Goring himself. He's calm, he's deliberate, and he's very self-assured. His Goring isn't a man defeated by capture, and he has chosen this moment to step onto the world stage and fight for his future. We then meet Supreme Court Justice Jackson, who faces the logistical nightmare of organizing an international tribunal that has never been attempted before. The film captures some of this tension, though, through Jackson's struggle to unite the Allies to ensure that the trial is morally and politically unassailable. Meanwhile, Rami Malek's Douglas Kelley, an American Army psychiatrist, arrives in Germany with orders to monitor the imprisoned Nazi leadership and make sure that none of them commit suicide before they can stand trial. He decides to study them, not just as patients, but as specimens, to see if he can figure out if evil can be defined and or measured. He believes that if he can understand what made these men capable of such atrocities, Maybe the world can prevent it from happening again in the future. Nuremberg opens with a written prologue as refugees shuffle down a muddy road in Germany and American soldiers secure the remnants of a broken Germany. It is a stark visualization of that moment in time that just kind of drops us into the aftermath in a very safe and restrained way. That moment is further subdued by the use of text against the quiet countryside. We've been seeing a lot of this in films lately, and the way they open their films using these written prologues as a shortcut to get people up to speed in the moment. That's where the film begins, and it's basically a strong opening for people who are already familiar with the events and the impacts of the Nazis in Germany and in Europe. However, the prologue really fails to set up the stakes to which the rest of the film has to rise. For younger audiences, the sense of global catastrophe caused by World War II is just missing because this text-based prologue is such a light touch. As a result, there really isn't a strong sense of why the Nuremberg trials were such a big deal until the film reaches the courtroom scene about 2/3 of the way in. That makes it starkly obvious. But there really isn't any other visual sense of what happened, why people should be concerned or care if they don't have the historical background that they need to get them to the point of really caring about why we're worried about these Nuremberg trials. If James Vanderbilt had spent just 5 minutes in the prologue showing a montage of newsreel clips from D-Day, or perhaps a train bound for a concentration camp, or even the ruined town of Oradour-sur-Glane, it would have instantly grounded the story in the scale of the war's horror and established why the Nuremberg trials mattered so much. That single choice would have created immediate tension and shown exactly why the tribunal could not afford to fail. And the film just didn't have that. So a lot of people who are new to this particular historical event won't have that greater context. In essence, what makes Nuremberg effective, though, is also where it fails. Nuremberg isn't historically precise, but you know what? It is thematically and emotionally accurate. As a result, Nuremberg isn't a factual play by play account of the events leading up to and during the trial. History buffs, World War II scholars, and people who are just deeply familiar with Nuremberg and the trials may kind of be put off by the liberties that the story takes in order to capture the dramatic essence of what actually happened during this period of time. So here's the thing you need to know about adaptations. There are many different types of adaptations that can be used to retell a story. In this case, Nuremberg uses what I would call an interpretive historical adaptation. My graduate studies actually focused on adaptation of story between different story forms. So, when you're dealing with a historical film based on real events, you have the choice of leaning into high accuracy in something like a documentary format, or leaning into a creative adaptation that fits the cinematic structure that is needed to convey the truth of the events without providing that play-by-play account that would require a huge host of characters, a much longer film, and a greater number of locations for a film like Nuremberg. An absolutely factual retelling would have required an extended, slow burn, dramatic plot that would have eliminated the conflicts that kept the pacing and energy up throughout the 2.5 hour runtime of this film. Worse, it would have made Hermann Goring the central character of the film from start to finish, which would have redirected the narrative tension in favor of him, making him a much more sympathetic figure simply by virtue of being the central focus of the film. The movie already portrays him as somewhat sympathetic, reasonable, and strategic. So giving him narrative dominance would have risked shifting the audience's empathy in the wrong direction. They needed a character like Douglas Kelley who could serve as Goring's foil throughout the film, who could remain as the focus for the movie, because he is there constantly to remind us that Goring was an expert at playing his audience and manipulating those around him to achieve what he wanted. That's why he was appointed as Hitler's second in command to take over leadership in the event that the Fuhrer was incapacitated. This is what Goring was primed for. And Kelley was actually a real man who played a real role in Nuremberg through his examination of Goring and the others. But the film extends his involvement with the prisoners and the trial itself to give the audience a consistent point of entry into Goring's character and his responses to the legal battle he was preparing to fight. And so that's the twist. That's like the major thing that is different, is that Kelley is present through the entire film. Rather than focusing on procedural accuracy or strict historical timelines, the film really leans into Kelley's internal journey and his need to understand whether evil is a fixed quality or a latent human potential. These choices deviate from the historical record, but they create a sense of truth that resonates within that side of the story. Nuremberg's truth, while grounded in facts, really embraces emotional logic over literal accuracy. It's not about what happened beat for beat within this story, but about what it felt like to bear witness to these events at this point in time. Russell Crowe gives one of his best performances in years. His portrayal of Hermann Goring is charismatic, calculating, and deeply unsettling. He understands that power isn't just taken, it's performed. Even when silent, Crowe really commands every scene like a man used to dictating the mood in any room that he enters. Rami Malek plays Douglas Kelley with this controlled intensity as he slowly reveals moments of compromising himself as his research kind of turns into this depressing realization about the nature of evil and the things that he does in order to get Goring to become comfortable with him in that growing connection between them. His quiet composure masks a growing obsession that feels both scientific and personal as he and Goring grow to understand each other better and better. Together, these two actors create a psychological duel. Then we have Michael Shannon, who brings sincerity to Justice Jackson, the man who works to turn moral outrage into a legitimate legal argument at a global scale. His scenes negotiating with world leaders add political texture that balances the film's emotional and psychological weight. However, the film doesn't quite capture the exceptionalism of what Jackson achieved and made him look kind of slightly incompetent at points in the courtroom scene with Goring. Richard E. Grant, Leo Woodall, John Slattery, and Colin Hanks round out the ensemble, grounding the film in this web of bureaucratic and military realism to support the two main storylines that we see. So, is Nuremberg worth the price of a ticket? Yeah, you know what? I think it does. I think it is. It captures the essence of the most important trial in human history and delivers powerful performances that carry its emotional core. For viewers who appreciate historical dramas that explore the moral questions behind real events, this film succeeds. It's exceptional in how it captures the feeling of that moment in time. Now, that said, as beautifully constructed as the film is, Nuremberg will likely test the patience of history buffs and scholars alike. It uses creative license freely, merging and condensing real people and events into a more cinematic narrative. Some character choices may feel a little odd or implausible outside of maybe a Hollywood film. That doesn't make the film any less engaging. It's not meant to be a documentary, it's an interpretation that aims for emotional truth rather than factual precision. Despite its flaws, Nuremberg really does stand as an impressive cinematic rendering of one of the most significant moments in global history. It also feels like a welcome return to the kind of thoughtful, large scale cinematic stories that defined the great historical dramas of the 1980s and 90s. Nuremberg really left me thinking about how we tell stories about justice and evil. The trial it depicts changed the world, and it showed that even after the most destructive war in history, humanity could come together to hold powerful men accountable. The film captures that spirit even when it stumbles on the details. So, Nuremberg, what did you think of it? Have you seen it yet? Are you planning to see it in theaters? If you're a history buff, I would love to hear your thoughts about the accuracy here and how you felt about it. I'm really curious whether you felt that the film gave you enough context early on to understand what was at stake in the film. Finally, I think that this film really does remind us that evil isn't confined to a single time or place. It's something that can emerge anywhere and at any time and in any person or group of people. When a group of people are technically responsible for the deaths of 3% of the world's population, it's really important to understand how this kind of evil emerges in order to stop it. And it's important to tell this story over and over to different generations so that they know what happened before and that they can learn from the lessons of the past. That is what makes this film so important. I only wish that they had put a little more oomph in the prologue to drill in why this was important. If you enjoyed this review, please do give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more, and share this review with others who might be thinking about seeing this film. While you're here, why not check out one of these reviews and let me know what you think. That's it for now, you guys. Happy viewing. I will see you all again soon. Bye for now.